to share my screen just to introduce the our esteemed panelists. So this is the current student panel. So these are all current PhD students at different institutions here in the US. So we have, I think Elvis, I think I saw Elvis earlier on the list of participants. So Elvis Abika is currently a PhD student at the University of Delaware. He's a chemical engineering graduate from Unilag, and he's also an incoming consultant at BCG. So we're excited for Elvis. So Solomon, I think some of you were at Solomon's presentation. So Solomon is a Knight Tennessee Fellow at Stanford University, also chemical engineering graduate from Unilag. Fola is in the Energy Systems Engineering PhD program, got her Master's of Science this year, from Stanford, and transitioned to the PhD program. Also did her Bachelor's of Science at Unilag. I think she did it in chemical engineering. I have all the details at the bottom. And then James, also chemical engineering graduate student at the University of Michigan, and got his Bachelor's in Science in chemical engineering from Unilag. So for Solomon and James got admission directly into the PhD program, and Elvis, Fola got into the Master's. Fola is not doing a chemical engineering PhD. She did a bachelor's in chemical engineering and switched. So we've kind of selected these students to give you like a different flavor. So not one of their stories is the same across all of them. So Elvis is also on the later end of his PhD career. And we'll also hear from Elvis later on in the future with a PhD. So Elvis, are you on? I'll make sure I can find you.
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. So I'll let you you're kind of leading this panel. So I'll spotlight you, Solomon, Fola, and James, and you guys can just take it over.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And so,
so do you have anything you want to want me to share for you, or
yeah? So
I have you spotlighted now.
I made slides. I'm like, they're just 2 slides, and I could just like walk through it and kind of like use that to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah. So you can share if you want to share.
Sharing screens in Zoom is kind of like a normal thing now. So not sure. Okay, great. I think it's great now.
Okay.
All right. So welcome everyone. My name is Elvis, and we have Solomon, we have Fola, and James. Funny enough, we all went to University of Vegas. I don't know if that was also a coincidence from Chibueze's side.
It's a coincidence. I did nothing. It was a coincidence.
We all finished from the same undergrad, same program. So, so I guess this panel is basically going to be answering as many questions as you have. We already have some questions. I kind of split them into 2 sections. The first one is kind of applying to grad school, and then the second is, getting through grad school and, the questions you have throughout your 5-6 years of grad school. So there are a number of questions we have now. Feel free to, shoot us any more questions in the chat. I'll try to look at those ones while we proceed through our conversation. But I'll just start off with this one so that we have some pointers to kind of like touch on. And I don't know, I'm just gonna ask our 3 panelists to kind of like, whoever has an answer should give it. I don't want to like assign it to the person, so that whichever person thinks they're more experienced on the topic would speak on it, and anyone could add, a point or 2 to that. So the first one is, how can I improve my chances of getting admitted? So Solomon, James, does anyone, or Fola, does anyone want to take this?
I can start.
Okay.
I think the first thing is, after you've listened to what everyone has said, you have a good SOP, you're applying, but one thing I want you to do is, I think you should apply to as many schools as possible, because I've seen people who like have the requisite stuff to be in graduate school, but they didn't get admitted because they applied to just the top schools. They applied to Stanford, MIT, and maybe Michigan, and they didn't get in. So I think what I would say is that apply to as many schools as possible. There are lists of schools that people don't know from Nigeria, like as Professor Chukwueze said, University of Chicago. Some people haven't heard of it. So just look out for schools and apply to as many as you can.
Yeah, definitely great point there, James. I know, Solomon, did you have anything you wanted to touch on or add, or Fola?
I do. It's so interesting. So this is the benefit of panels like this because there's varying perspectives. On the other hand, while I agree that it's good to not put all your eggs, oh Lord Jesus, in one basket, it's important that you are really intentional about programs and departments that you apply to. It's intentional that you're able to match your passions to the sort of the available resources at the school. So instead of like just choosing to apply anywhere and everywhere, because you're really just trying to get into grad school, I would say be selective, because if you're able to communicate your passion and fit effectively, your strength, it just makes for a very strong application.
Yeah. And I think those are two good points. And I'll just like wrap up, on this question there. Of course, spreading your options to the schools gives you a lot more opportunities. But then you also, like as Fola said, you also want to be very intentional, because you don't want to be spread everywhere and there's no depth as to your application. So, as you're spreading yourself, if the story you're trying to convey is consistent across those different schools, then fine, then that's bingo, because you're still able to channel the strong fit across the different universities. But if each of those universities need you to tailor yourself in a different perspective, then it makes it so much harder, because you don't even have the time. Like writing an SOP is hard. So when you have one SOP, it fits one story for the most part. So, if you can find several schools that story fits perfectly, then, it's definitely advisable. But if they're just 2 or 3 where you have that strong, connection, then, I think those will really get your chances up. And one thing I would say is also try to be aware of the current trends in the field. So if you're applying to biology, applying to environmental sciences, whatever is the new trend, like be aware, like show that you know what that's about. And most likely those are areas where there will be a lot of admissions, not admissions into, but there will be a lot of new faculty, new research, new funding. So if you show interest in those areas, that would be a smart thing to have in your SOP, just like looking at it like, oh, this person knows about machine learning, like, and you're showing that you know the techniques, unsupervised learning, all of that, like you're like, it boosts your chances just from them, looking at that. So I'll just say those few things. And so to the next one, I know they touched on this before, but again, is IELTS necessary?
No, I don't know. It's not for the most part for the schools I applied to, but everything is subject to the requirements of the schools you're applying to, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you check. You want to start out with a potential list of schools based on what people just suggested. You want to have a good number of schools. At the same time, you need to ensure that there's a fit. Then you go through the requirements for each of those schools and see if they require IELTS or TOEFL. I think TOEFL is easier to manage. If you write the TOEFL and you take the other tests required, then you should be fine. For the most part, I don't think the IELTS is used in the US, apart from MIT though. I think MIT requests for the IELTS in lieu of TOEFL if you don't write TOEFL,
Yeah, that's true, but MIT also does not require an English requirement or whatever for Nigerian students.
Oh, really?
Remember?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's also a program specific.
Maybe
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So I think basically the consensus here is, you definitely need IELTS. And what I would advise anyone, there are some schools that don't require IELTS or TOEFL, and there are schools that do. But what I would say is that as a Nigerian student applying here, as something that, Rovana touched on, they don't know most of our universities. So if they have a student who has a good GPA and you have a good GPA, but then they have a TOEFL score and you don't, then it's a disservice to you. So I feel having a TOEFL or IELTS score that's good is also a metric that boosts your chances. So, if it's something that you can pay and do, then definitely do it. Because if you have a 116 on your TOEFL, I'm like, well, this person is good. This person knows how to speak English. Like, I want this person in my program. So anything that would improve how the admission committee would see you, definitely do it. If it's not too expensive. But I would say it is necessary. If you can do it, like, definitely add it to it. And so on to the next one. Can I get admitted without publications?
Oh, yes.
The research I did in Nigeria was okay. I don't want to talk. Someone else should talk.
I think yes, you can get admitted without publications. But I want you to know that PhD is a research environment, and they want to see your research progress. And if you do have publications, a big plus. But if you don't, you can put yourself in a position whereby you can be competitive with the people that are applying, because many people are applying from the US. You have undergrad that are doing sophisticated research, and compared to what you did in Nigeria, it's just nothing to write about. So you want to find ways to reach out to what people are doing here, try to make yourself aware of what people are doing, and read a lot of literature, and write about them. That will kind of show that you have intention to do sophisticated research, and based on that, they can admit you. But if you're going to just focus on what you've done in Nigeria, which they don't even have an idea about, it's just easy pass, I don't think you really stand a chance with that.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone had something to add to that, but
I would say a publication like James mentioned is a plus, but it's not. Again, there's no one size fits all. You could definitely get into a PhD program without being published. I did. I did into 2 programs at Stanford without being published. I would say even if you're not published, you want to, again, make yourself appear competitive. So it all goes to how you tell your story. There's immense power in storytelling. All those sort of projects you've worked on, design projects, research type projects, independent projects, class projects, frame them and really, like Ola said in his presentation, take the STAR approach to telling that story and be reflective on the skills you've gained and the impact of the work that you've done. And I think while, the research being done in Nigeria may not be as sophisticated as that being done here in the US, you still have the research experience, right? And so no one can take that away from you. So again, communicate effectively about what you've done.
Yeah, and I think I'll just wrap this up here. Yes, you can definitely get admitted without publications, but I think what James and Fola have rightly said is you want to show that you have the skills, the critical thinking skills. And I think one of the good things coming from Nigeria is that we are forced to do a research project. It's not like the US where I want to do a thesis undergrad project. No, you must do it. In final year, you must do projects. It's not so that gives you the opportunity to have a story to tell. That I drew up this problem. I designed the experiment. This is how I navigated when this experiment didn't work. This was the result. So even if you don't have a publication, just you telling them that, I took a project from scratch, I designed the problem, and this is how I went about it. That alone shows that this person understands the intricacies of doing research in any space, because that's what you'll be doing for the next 5 years when you get into grad school. It's just going to be new projects, define the problem, design your experiment, and test them. So once you can show that, we already have that. That's one of the blessings we have coming from an undergrad in Nigeria. And so use that to your advantage, and really tell that story of what project you did, how did you solve the problem, how did you design the experiment, and what results did you get. Maybe there's a process of maybe you're in the line of publishing a paper. Say that. If you're not, just really highlight that experience that you have there. The next one is, is NYC completion a prerequisite for application? I'll just give you the answer. Like, they didn't even know what NYC is, and no one cares about what NYC is. I don't think anyone. No, I think it's a clear no for this one, except someone has something otherwise to say. But no, good. We're on the same page, so perfect. The other question I saw that I thought was very interesting is, which chemical engineering research fields have seen, an increase in the application of machine learning? And I would say not just chemical engineering, and kind of what, Ola touched on, he has a lot of expertise in that space, but, does anyone want to talk about, this? And I think maybe framing it in the place of how to advise potential students to start thinking about new areas of research, as they're framing their stories, as they're looking at applying, how can they use this information on what new research fields are coming up, how can they use that information to their advantage as they're applying? So that's how I kind of frame the question to our panel.
I think in the field of catalysis, there's a lot of machine learning going on where you can understand how catalyst has performed for certain reactions, and you can predict what catalyst will be useful for a new set of reactions, because it's just expensive to try out a lot of stuff over and over and over before you get the perfect catalyst. So people are doing a lot of machine learning where they bring in data from previous reactions, previous catalysts that have done so well, and to kind of predict what can be useful, what metals they can combine together to get some new active materials for new important reactions. So I would say area as regards to catalysis, getting a lot of increase in machine learning research.
To add to that, it might just be a principle thing for me, but I am strongly against machine learning for the sake of machine learning. I think a lot of people now feel like, oh, to be cutting edge, you have to be doing ML tech research. There's a lot of new areas and new fields. There's innovation outside of machine learning. Yes, you could have this really great idea for how to take a machine learning approach to the subject you're interested in and pitch that by all means on your application. But then there's also tons of questions as to a new way to do things that's been done for hundreds of years. There's new innovative questions on sort of core science. There's new innovative questions, especially in the field of energy, as to how to do things differently, sustainably, how to answer equity and access problems, which is, with the capitalist society that we've lived in, those haven't always been priority. But then going into a new age of global warming, and we see distributed impacts and how these impacts disproportionately affect sort of lower income people. How do you answer the equity part of science? How do you make science more humane? So there's many ways to do innovative research outside of ML. So again, it goes to what you're passionate about. You don't have to conform, is what I would say.
Yeah. And I think that's really a good point, because a lot of people try to run with a phase like, oh, machine learning is a thing, but that's not going to be sustainable over 5 years, because it's not something that's drawn from your own interest. And I think with any research you're doing in grad school, you also want to have a strong interest, because that's how you're going to push through experiments that don't work, an advisor that isn't nice, through reviewers who are just being mean, is that you are interested in the work and you're ready to get the job done. So yes, machine learning is very popular now, but if you're really interested in it, take online courses. There's Coursera, there's EDX, and really test out the waters and see if there's something you really like. If it is, then really get the skills, get the software trainings that you need, and it might be something that might give you an extra bump in your application. Like, I would say that it won't, because like in my research group, my advisor would, right now he's trying to hire postdocs, and one of the things he's looking out for is machine learning expertise. So it's definitely something that's attractive. But again, there are different types of research, and don't try to fit into that mold because everyone is trying to do it. Like, be yourself, be unique, and come with the strength and quality that you have in your research, and you're going to be excellent somewhere. And something that Abiodun rightly said about NYC, it's also good to get your NYC done because you don't know how this election is going to be because you don't know. So it's always nice to get your NYC done. And I think it's really, really wise that, when you finish from undergrad, you have 1 year to do your NYC. At least for me, during my 1 year of NYC was when I took my GRE, was when I applied to grad school. And so once I got off NYC, I finished NYC April, I flew out for my PhD in July. So that NYC period gives you a buffer time to like practice, prepare, apply. So I think it's a really wise thing to do. Complete your NYC, and within the 1 year of your NYC, you can take all the exams, IELTS, GRE, apply to all the schools. You can save up money for your applications. And so, and do that so that even when you're done with your PhD in the US and maybe there are no jobs or whatever, you have to go back, you'll not be stranded, in the Nigeria with Boo Boo. But but yeah, I think that's that. And then I think the last one is just like your advice on, what soft skills, technical skills. Of course, the technical skills would vary with your field, but I would say more to the soft skills that one should have, going into a PhD program. And I think this is for everyone on the panel.
Yeah, I can go first on this one. I think some of the skills, I don't know if I would say must, because it's very difficult to have every single, there's no one, there's no template that solves all of the problems or fits into every PhD program. But some key things that I would say from my experience are that you must have shown that you can take initiative, independence of thought. You must show that you can think really critically about very complex problems. Reflect on those problems, what you gained from those problems, and also project into the future. Whenever I think about applying to a PhD program, I always want people to try to think about how to connect the dots. What have you done? How have those things been? And what are you thinking about doing? And I think one thing that is very usually lacking in most applications is what people plan to do. I think Ola highlighted that. It's not enough to say you're interested in a professor's research. Anybody can write that. I have a passion for machine learning. That's bullshit. You need to show that you've really thought critically about the subject. You've come up with big questions that are unanswered, possibly answered, but really just show a new perspective of thinking about scientific, non-scientific questions. And I think that ability to think really critically and execute your thoughts in writing is one of the skills that you must demonstrate before. You should demonstrate if you want to get into a good PhD program. Soft skills, I already mentioned some. Technical skills, you want to learn, so for different programs, there's some software that you really need to be conversant with. For me, I didn't know a lot of MATLAB before grad school. I didn't know any MATLAB, so I struggled a lot in my first year. Well, that's one of the things. You want to know what's essential to thrive in the particular program you're applying to. I don't know if people want to add some other stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. As it comes to software, like Solomon said, I think I had the same experience. But for things that can be learned, they can be learned, and you'll be fine, you'll live. I think some important things are, first of all, would be resilience. It'll get tough, it'll get difficult. You need to have some thick skin. I think it's important for you to learn how to prioritize yourself and your wellness, because you would, as a grad student, need to be able to strike a balance so you don't go crazy. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And then some things that I would say are super important that you that would really help you along the way. One would be the ability to work in a team and, you know, just be able to talk to people. That is one highly underrated skill in grad school, being able to cold email professors or cold email colleagues, even being able to walk up to someone in a class and say, hey, do you want to work in this problem set together? Being able to, you know, making friends, being able to network in different circles. I think that's really, really important. It would help you along the way to be able to make those connections that would help you in work, to build collaborations, to make friendships that would keep you sane in grad school. So it's a really important skill. Another one I would say is communication in writing and communication in speaking. You would find yourself in scenarios where you have to be able to communicate your research sort of to different audiences, to someone who can call you out on your bullshit, so like a professor and advisor, or to someone who knows absolutely nothing about that area. You need to be able to, again, be a good storyteller when you need to, be a good story writer as well. Those are some of the skills I'd say are super underrated in grad school.
And then James.
Is it for me?
Yeah, if you have something to add, but it's fine if you tell.
I just wanted to emphasize on the importance of collaboration, because it's just, grad school is just not working just independently by yourself. Most times your papers will involve a lot of people. So if you don't know how to really reach out to people, engage in collaborative research and be friends with people, I think you have difficult time making a lot of publications, because you just be all by yourself. And most times for you to give high and sophisticated publications out there, you just can't, your research is just not sufficient enough, or your intellectual progress is not sufficient enough. So I just wanted to emphasize on collaboration here.
Yeah. And I'll just say, kind of like the last thing to kind of tie things up on this section is, like, we're all Nigerians here. And I think one of the things I would like to celebrate is the drive that we have and the people skills that we have. Like, I don't think I've seen any Nigerian in my program who doesn't know how to like get along with people. Like, like that hustle, that, you just know how, like, you just like, you must walk, it's like that drive, when you see everything going on, that at the back of your mind, like, this PhD has to work. So like you bring your 100% self, you bring that drive, you bring that, the pressure of your mom calling you every day, like, oh, don't come home, oh, don't come home, oh, you are able to channel that. So I'm sure that any of you who have been selected in this program, if you get admitted into a PhD program in the US, I'm pretty sure you're going to be very successful. And just really, put in all your effort and ask all the questions, and that's why we're here. So feel free to shoot more questions in the chat. Now we'll be switching to, kind of questions that you would encounter as you proceed with your PhD during the PhD program. So the first one, this was a question someone actually asked, this wasn't me. So what's the cost for accommodation?
You don't want to know.
Well, Fola is saying that because she's in California. Like, if you're in Kansas, you're probably going to be paying like a quarter of what she's paying. So, but maybe you can say how much you're paying, and maybe James can say how much he's paying. And then they can get some context as to what accommodation is like.
We don't need to get into the details. Let's just focus on, there's a budget for whatever city you're going to, that your admissions or financial aid office would have put together, and your funding, just make sure that whatever they're offering you covers the estimated cost of living for that city. That's what's important.
Yeah. And I think the main thing is, like, for any program you get admitted to for a PhD, like, you're going to be funded, and the funding is enough, more than enough, to cover your accommodation. So like, you don't have to worry about the cost. It's a valid question, again, coming from your background, whoever asked the question, but you don't have to worry. The funding is more than enough. Like Tunde Alawode actually mentioned, he was still sending money. And I think a number of us still send money back home to our family. You know, it's enough to take care of ourselves, feed, have fun, you know, and take care of our family. So the second question I think is really important, and I know it varies with schools, but you know, how is the course structure tailored? And I think, you know, as we answer this question, especially for, you know, maybe if you can tie the structure of the courses here to kind of like the preparations that they might need to like focus on in their undergrad in Nigeria. So like, let me just put in some context. I am a chemical engineering PhD. The course structure here is thermal, kinetics, and transport are core. So it's like, you need to make sure in your undergrad, like you really have strong fundamentals in thermal, kinetics and transport. So, you know, maybe you can just touch on something like that for your different programs. You know, maybe, you know, they're electives, they're not electives, you know, maybe 4 courses in a semester. I don't know. So if anyone wants to just shed some more light on that.
Yeah, I think you already made a good point with chemical engineering. It's pretty much consistent all over the place. The core, the fundamentals of math. You must be able to do very rigorous math, thermal, kinetics, and at Stanford, there are 2 additional core classes. One focuses on spectroscopic techniques. That's something that was slightly different and sort of difficult to prepare for based on the curriculum in undergraduate universities in Nigeria. And the last part is biochem. So those are the core things in chemical engineering here. And the typical structure is that you have 3 classes per quarter. A quarter is a 10-week stint where you have a bunch of, you know, assignments and exams along the 10 weeks. So you're basically active throughout the 10-week process. There's hardly any week where you don't have something to do. Another way to really think about, I don't know what the person that put this question could have meant, how is the PhD in itself structured, right? So if you're thinking about the chemical engineering program or most PhD programs, you spend the better part of your first year taking very rigorous classes and learning some of the foundational skills you need to thrive in research. From the second year, you go light on classes, you take your typical qualifying exams, after which you begin to go up, you know, so semi-hard on research. At this point, the expectations sort of shift from you demonstrating your ability to actually putting out work in the literature. And after your last 2 or 3 years, depending on how long you want to spend in your PhD program, you begin to think about defending after putting as much, you know, work as is required by your advisor out there for the scientific community to consume. That's another way to think about the question, because I don't know what exactly the person meant.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And just kind of following up on that, I think in general, for most PhD programs, your first year, in the US, your first year and a half or the first 2 years is, you know, most likely going to be very course heavy. You're taking classes, you know, every semester. And then from the end of your second year and above, that's most likely going to be like your research, like most of your research focus is going to be there, where your full-time job is to do research. So that kind of like culminates in kind of the 5 years. It kind of, that midpoint where it branches off kind of varies with the program. It varies based on how many courses you've taken. So I, for one, finished all my classes in a year and a half, and I, you know, started focusing on my research, you know, from midpoint of my second year. But it kind of varies with everyone. But it's within that same space where the first 2 years are very class heavy. In the first year, you're literally taking classes. At least in my program, you don't take research. But again, the first 2 years, very class heavy. You're taking classes. Then the last 3 years or 4 years is then focused on research. You can always still take classes that you think are important or useful. But that is, I would say, the general structure of, you know, the program in general.
Elvis, I just wanted to emphasize on one course, fluid dynamics. If it's one of your core courses in the university you probably get into, I think I've seen a lot of Nigerian students struggle with fluid dynamics. So it might be something you want to take extra time to look at and probably prepare yourself, because I think a lot of US schools like do fluid dynamics in a way that we weren't taught in Nigeria. So a lot of students struggle so much in fluid dynamics, and you don't want to be in that position. So you're just getting to know ahead to prepare yourself.
Thank you so much, Nevia Stokes. Oh, that name, Nevia Stokes in fluid, was not for me. And best equation. So, and that's really true. Like, and I think even for people in mechanical engineering, people in material science, that's something that's still very appropriate for you. Like, strengthen wherever you can in those areas. And you know, again, if you come here and you don't know it, like, you'll be fine. Look at us, we look happy. um, um, all right. But yeah, you just anything you can do now to, like, you know, strengthen those fundamentals. In general, whichever program you're in, chemical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever is a fundamental course, like, try to refresh them, try to really be grounded in them. And you know, one way of doing that, as I mentioned before, is you can go on EDX or Coursera and take additional classes just to really strengthen your understanding of those fundamentals. And so that once you come over here, it's really easy. You could refer back to your notes from undergrad, whichever one you think, but really get a very strong fundamental base. Solomon is shaking his head, is like, no. But you know, whichever way you can strengthen that base. Yeah, Solomon, you're gonna say something.
I was just gonna say, and I told Solomon this when it was gonna start, like, don't bother reading books if you've done those classes already. Just party, play, because you'll still die when you get here. So you might as well just, like, come and suffer the suffer, you know, and enjoy yourself.
Yes.
I actually have a counter to that point. I think if you're going to a school where you know a Nigerian there, if I know someone coming to Stanford, I know the specific resources to direct them to that will make their first year significantly less stressful.
Yeah.
So that's something I think it's. I mean, you don't, if you're going to a program where there's nobody that you really know, then I mean, the best advice is just enjoy life, because you're about to.
And quickly, something that Solomon said triggered, and I something I had in my mind. Please, when you're applying to schools, if there's a Nigerian person in that program, it really improves your chances.
Yeah.
Like, because we have gone ahead, now they know us, they know our universities, and they're like, oh, we're willing to take, it's not a risk anymore. They're like, oh, we've had a student from Unilag, he's come, he's excelled, he's published papers. Oh, we can admit another student from Unilag. So you're better off applying, again, aside, you know, the research interest and your fit. You know, if there's a Nigerian student in that program, you definitely, I would say you stand a better chance, because it's a Nigerian student, because they know the Nigerian student, they know that you're from the same university. I can speak to the University of Delaware. Like, I was the first who got into University of Delaware, and I know, like, for every year, they've always offered admission to a Nigerian student, at least from University of Lagos. So, like, if there's a Nigerian person at that university in that program, like, just use your brain and put the school in the place. Don't do MIT. If it's not, there's no possible MIT. Don't. last is all of us. We shall end up in the same work. So you understand. If it's top 10, it's top 10. So, but I just wanted to just share that, like, try to, like, find a Nigerian. Like, if there isn't, it's fine. But it definitely does help if there's a Nigerian there. So have that at the back of your mind. And I think there are some points in the chat. Oh, someone.
People are just laughing.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. that's how I am. I am very jocular, and I joke a lot. So just know that. And I can be in Unilag. I was very ras, and so I'm still very ras. But I try to put it together. You know, so it's like posh, but the inside is very, very ras. So the third question is, how do I communicate my interest in being part of a research group? And I think maybe this is kind of like how I frame it is, now that you're in grad school, you're doing classes, how do you then transition from, doing classes to actually joining a research group? What things do I consider as I try to join a group, and how do I kind of win that position of being in that group? Like, how do I, like the dynamics of joining a group, what things do I need to consider in doing that?
So I will jump in here, and someone else would need to speak to this because my experience has been completely different. Just because, so I'm in the Energy Resources Engineering department at Stanford, and we do things so very differently. As opposed to very many other programs, almost all others, if I'm correct, where you come in and then you do a rotation, you do rotations with different labs, and then you pick an advisor. In my department, you come in, you're assigned to work with someone. And so if you don't like that person, then, you could choose to switch later on, but that's sort of how it works. And so on your statement of purpose, you indicate your research interest and you indicate who you want to work with, possibly, but then they try to, depending on the fit, they assign you to the person working on in that area. But there's many, many other alternatives for choosing a lab or an advisor to work with. You could take a class with someone while you're already here. And if you're super interested in sort of what they're teaching and want to learn more, you could sort of, go talk to them. If they have a project going on, you join their group meeting and build a relationship up there, and they put you on a project. It could be that, I'm so sorry. It could be that as you start off in the program, like I said, you could do rotations with different labs. So I think it's very department and university specific. So you would need to, again, find out from current grad students what the culture in the lab is.
Let me speak from my university. I made a very big mistake, but I got into the lab that I wanted. So the mistake I made was that because you get into the lab, I think your first 2 months of the program, so you meet with professors and you discuss about the research that they do in their lab. So my mistake was that I didn't read through their research papers. So I was just talking to the professor. I'm a very hardworking person. I love to do research. And the professor was asking me questions about what he did, what he's doing in his lab. And I didn't know anything. Like I was just blank, right? So, but you don't want to be in that position. You want to prepare yourself, right? You're meeting a professor. You want to know almost everything about the research he or she is doing. And, you give the person a question. I read about this paper. You did this. I was wondering if you we're thinking about doing this, this result's amazing. They want to see that you are interested in their lab and what they do, and you understand some of the techniques that they are using in the lab. So you want to meet some of the graduate students and you want to be really, really familiar with their publications. That will give you a very big chance. In fact, they will talk to the person who is assigning, I need this student, please. You understand? So I was just trying to make clear what I was bringing to the table, that I'm very strong and hardworking and passionate, because I was. But that was not enough. But I was lucky because I got the lab that I wanted. Maybe he saw that and he was like, okay, I think this is what I need from a student.
Do you need me to add something?
No, it's fine if you don't have anything to add. One thing I would just say, again, while we have these questions here, because we see that's a good thing why we have this question, because we know that these people will not want to ask questions. So please, this our question will soon finish. So our time is still remaining. So please ask your question, because when you not get the admission, don't come and be asking us, say, help us, help us. We want to help you now. You better help yourself. Put the question in the chat.
So you guys have 15 more minutes, so
15
more minutes.
So so the other one is, can I do internships or gain industry experience during my PhD?
Of course, yes, you can, but it's really dependent on your advisor. Certain advisors don't really frown upon internships because they generally assume that if you're coming into a PhD program, you want to do research for the most part, and they try to dissuade students from doing internships. But I think if you can make a case for why you think you need an internship for your potential career path, then you can do an internship and gain industry-related experience. But it's sort of different for people that are 100% certain that they want to go into academia. I'd imagine that a professor in that instance, an advisor, would encourage you to do more research over the summer or just work in another research lab to really ensure that you build your research portfolio. But I think you can definitely do an internship, and it is very advisor dependent.
Yeah.
I was going to say that is so interesting, and I do know that that's Solomon's experience. My department's so different. It's like, yes, get the fuck out there, go do an internship. Like, why are you here? You know, you need the industry. The perspective is you need the industry, hands-on experience. You need to see why you're doing the science you're doing, how useful it is, and that enriches your work, and you get perspectives from what the industry needs to inform sort of research directions within the lab and within the department as well. And also, man, it's nice to make money, fam. You don't want to be poor the whole time. So yeah, get that money, do that internship.
Yeah, so I think just like tying things together on this one is, of course, you can do internships, and I would say one of the things is it's very dependent on your program. For engineering programs, they're very traditional. So like chemical engineering, mechanical, it's not something that would be encouraged to you. I think for other programs that are more like very policy, very interdisciplinary, then there will be a lot of application for you to go on internships. And then when we kind of narrow down on the traditional programs, as Solomon rightly said, it's very advisor dependent. One of the things we think about is, oh, I want to gain industry experience, but in the real sense, when industry is trying to hire you after your PhD, it's for your research skills, not necessarily because you've worked at a company. That's because when you're giving your 1 hour presentation to your potential to the company that will potentially hire you, you're not going to tell them that you work somewhere. They're going to look at your research skills and see if it fits what they're trying to do at their group. So in the end, for most PhD students, the internship is just for you to make money for the most part. And so that's why some advisors don't really like it, because you're not going to be doing research within that period, and they need to get research work done. So again, it's kind of very dicey, depends on the program, depends on the advisor. Of course, there's the opportunity to do it, but you need to ask yourself the question, like, why exactly am I doing this? Like, if you want to make money, fine. If you want to really learn about industry, then, clearly say all of that. But you need to ask yourself those key questions as you progress along your PhD, and ask yourself, like, is this even the right time? Do I even have the time to do this? Just figure out all of those things.
I'll jump in again there. It's like you said, motivation is really important. But then again, I think this perspective that there's some sort of dichotomy between industry and research might be a little mistaken, because you can do research within industry. Your internship could be a research internship, and you would still be making a ton of money. Maybe, but then again, you could, for my field, you could maybe want to take an internship with a utility or with a policy organization, and you're learning so much more that enriches your research in an invaluable way. So again, it really depends on where you find yourself, and I want you to keep an open mind. If it works for you, it might be the best thing about your time in your PhD, and those experiences, you might end up being hired for that. Actually, it's happened for me, so I can't say.
Okay. So I'm just gonna at this point kind of like switch to the chat box and kind of like pull questions from what they asked, because I think the questions here, like, I'm like, for someone who hasn't applied to grad school, like, you don't necessarily need to know what a dissertation program looks like, but if like you write papers and then it goes into a paper, That's what it is. So Ikechukwu asks, how do we build our research experience? Most of us did some research on just our final project, with some years of work experience after graduation. How do you put up a great research proposal? So I guess this is going into, them applying, how do they kind of communicate their research experience? How do you, communicate a great research proposal? So, in quick bites, how would you kind of advise them on that?
Yeah, it's sad, and I kind of understand your pain that you didn't get exposed to research, like some people here do. But what you can do is you can just get yourself open to reading. Like Solomon has said, critical understanding of the literature, makes you to write as if you're a researcher. So even if you can't access some of this literature, reach out to some of us. I can't download this, but can you help me download some literature in this area? It will help you to write a responsible research statement. If you don't know it, you can write it. Do you understand? So that's the advice I can give if you don't have time or you don't have an opportunity to actually engage in productive research. But then you have papers out there you can read. That's what I would say.
And I'll just kind of, I just want to piggyback off what James said. One advice I'll give to every single person applying is that when you're trying to frame this research proposal, find a review paper. And this is my cheat code. In every review paper, there's always a chapter that's context, future outlook. So basically, they're saying this is what everyone has done, and this is what is missing. So what you can do, go to that place that they say is missing. Copy and okay, no, don't copy and paste, but basically go there and say this is what has not been done, and that's what I want to do. Like that's simple, So find a review paper that kind of like summarizes what the field has done. If you can't read all the papers, and then see where there's a gap, and that's summarized in the future outlook or what's next, and then that just gives you a clear statements that this is what needs to be done, and that's what I really want to do. And so that's just like a quick expert tip on that side of things. But Solomon was going to say something.
Yeah, so you guys make good points for how to demonstrate interest, but I think from that question, something I also see that the person is worried about is that they don't have sufficient research experiences. But I don't think you should only write about research experiences in your statement of purpose. You've been through so many things in life, right? What does research entail? Research entails you're designing experiments for a project, having to watch those experiments fail 98% of the time. Think about your life and all the experiments you've designed, the projects you've done. They don't necessarily need to be research topics, but showing the process through which you struggle with certain things in your life and what you learned through that process could go a long way in showing that you have that grit for research, because research is it's a lot of sweat. Yeah. A lot of smart people struggle to research. So showing that you have a story about things that you've struggled with, what you learned through those struggles, and how they've better prepared you to grind through things is something that I think is also useful in addition to what James and Elvis just said.
I can see Fola like snapping.
So five more minutes, guys.
Yeah, great stuff. And so Ferami asks, does completing a PhD indirectly streamline you to research or lecturing area? No. And I think this is going to be touched on more in the next panel, but most of us coming from Nigeria, we always think like, oh, I'll go back and become a lecturer. At least that's what we'll bobo them in statement of purpose. But no, I'm like, for Chibweze, he's now a professor. For me, I'm in consulting. For someone else, they're in, like Chiamaka, she's going to be working as a research scientist at Dow. So it's a myriad of opportunities. And no, it's not just lecturing. Somebody also asked, must you have published research work? We kind of touched on this before. No, you don't have to, but you want to be able to show that you have, the critical problem solving skills, how to frame and design, an experiment, this is the problem. this is what I want to know, and this is how I design experiments to kind of probe that question. Gonna scroll down. What you wish you had known before applying to grad school. Quick two sentences, right? Two sentences is plural. Yeah, three. Each of you, quick, what you wish you had known before you applied to grad school. Start off with Solomon because you are shining your teeth.
I'm trying to restrict my thought to two sentences. Don't stress about the process, I think. Once you apply, don't stress about the process because a lot of things go into the fitting. You fit in with the program. So if you just apply, do your best, put your best foot forward, and don't stress about the process, then I think you'll be fine. That's what I would say.
James?
I would just say one thing I would have, if I had known, is to know that I am actually smart to be in the US and I'm an asset. Because I think one issue people usually have is that when you come here, you feel, oh, maybe you're just coming here to just take their money and run away. It's not true. Like you are an asset. Come with that confidence. It's very important. Like when I came in, I don't know if I'm going ahead of my time, but it's important you come with so much confidence so that you can. These people, they're afraid of you. You're coming from a place where you are majority, you are all black. So you come here and you see yourself as, oh, I'm black and there are a lot of whites. It might cause some kind of complex. You don't want that. So come with that, your mindset that you are an asset, you are smart, and you can beat people. You need it. And that's how you can really do so well here.
Right on, Pastor James. He entered the spirit. No, but I think that's a really, really valid point. Like, you are smart. So every person who has been selected, like, you are smart, you're equally as good as any other person here. And that's why we who are on the panel, that's why we're here sharing our successes, that we've been able to transition from Nigeria and we're doing excellently well. So you are able to do it. Like, don't think that you are less while you're processing or you're going through the process or applying. Like, you're good, you're smart. Like, the fact that you're a first-class student in Nigeria, it means a whole lot. Like, you're smart. And so, like, take that and use that to empower yourself as you try to apply to all these schools. And if Fola wants to add something too.
First things first is it's a job, it's work. It's not just going to school. It's basically you're combining a full-time job with going to school. So it's hard. Just be prepared for that. But then one thing I wish that I had done earlier on, way 4 years ago or 3 years ago when I just started here, was prioritize sort of my wellness as much as I prioritize, the chase, the wanting to be perfect and excellent and being the best at everything. It's like, how do you weigh wanting to be challenged and doing new things versus, wanting to learn new things and jumping off a cliff? And so I wish I prioritized, I wish I'd paced myself better and prioritize my mental wellness, dealt with anxiety better, and reached out to people and talked and found resources earlier on. But yeah, I would just say it's a marathon, not a sprint. Make sure you're doing fine, because if you're well-being, you're more productive as well in your work, and you'll be fine.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So should we call that a wrap?
Call it a wrap.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
So thanks, Solomon, James, Elvis, and Fola for this panel, and lots of laughs. And that's why I had my video off.